the dust and the death. The wind was mean that afternoon, dry as bone and full of grit. It came off the hills in sharp whips, tearing loose the last scraps of cottonwood leaves and hurling them down Bitter Creek's single, sun-baked road. A creaking wagon waited in front of the old Miller place, Clara May's home, its wheels half buried in dust, its driver silent as stone. Two men were hauling out furniture, a broken cradle, a rocking chair missing a leg, and a trunk scarred by years of travel. Each thud of wood on wagon boards echoed like a hammer on her heart. "Don't touch that," Clara said, stepping forward. Her hand was shaking, but her voice wasn't. The sheriff, broad and red-faced under his star, looked up from the papers in his hand. "Sorry, Miss May. Orders from Redstone Bank. Debt's due, and Mr. Kerrigan owns the note now." She stared at him, the word Kerrigan twisting in her gut like a knife. A horse's hooves cut through the wind then, slow, deliberate, metallic. Every head turned. He came out of haze like a ghost, tall in the saddle, hat brim low, coat flapping behind him like a black flag. The horse was a great chestnut thing, muscles rippling under the sunlight. The rider dismounted without a word, tying the reins to the porch rail with practiced grace. Luke Kerrigan. Everyone in Bitter Creek knew his name. Some said he'd built his fortune from blood and cattle. Others swore he'd once been a gunslinger, but no one had proof. Only stories whispered when the lamps burned low. Now, dust settled around him like smoke as he looked at the young woman standing in his path. Her dress was patched, her boots scuffed white from the road. But her eyes, they were fierce as the sky before lightning. "This your land?" he asked, voice low, rough from sun and silence. "It was my father's," Clara said, steady. "He built it with his hands. Buried him by that fence line not 2 weeks ago." Luke glanced toward the small wooden cross, barely visible through the waving grass. His jaw tightened. He owed more than this place is worth. "I know," she said softly, "but please don't take my home." The words broke from her like a prayer, soft but certain. Behind her, the screen door banged in the wind. Luke looked at her a long time, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. Even the horses seemed to sense something in the stillness. Finally, Luke stepped closer. "The law says this land's mine now." Clara swallowed, chin trembling. Then the law's wrong. Her defiance hung there, fragile and beautiful, like a thread stretched too tight. Luke studied her face. The dirt streaked across her cheek, the faint outline of her father's wedding ring on a chain around her neck. Then he turned to the sheriff. "Stop the loading." The sheriff blinked. "Sir," I said, "stop it." The men froze mid-step, furniture half-lifted. Dust drifted down in lazy spirals. Luke looked back at Clara. "There's one way you can keep this place." Her breath caught. "What way?" He didn't blink. "Marry me." The word struck harder than any blow. Even the wind seemed to pause. The sheriff's eyes went wide. One of the laborers coughed and looked away. Clara took a step back. You can't be serious." "I am." "Why?" Luke's gaze slid past her toward the horizon, as if seeing something buried deep in memory. "Because your father once saved my life," he said quietly, "and I don't intend to repay that debt by taking what's his." Her lips parted, but no sound came. He turned back to her. "If you're my wife, the house stays yours. No one touches it. No bank, no sheriff." Her heart hammered. "You don't even know me." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "Maybe I don't, but I knew your father, and that's enough." The wind rose again, rattling the tin roof, stirring her hair across her face. She tasted grit and salt on her lips. Behind her, the cradle creaked as it swung from the wagon's edge, a small, forgotten thing. She caught it before it fell, pressing it to her chest. The cradle smelled of cedar and smoke and all that was left of her home. She looked up at Luke Kerrigan, the richest man in Bitter Creek, the one everyone feared, and for a moment she saw something behind his steel-gray eyes. Not cruelty, not pride, something tired, something lonely. Her father's voice echoed faintly in her memory. "A man's word is all he has, girl. And sometimes it's the only rope between heaven and hell." She took a breath. "And if I refuse?" "Then I'll ride away," he said simply. And by sundown, you'll have no roof left to refuse me under. Silence stretched. The sheriff looked down, rubbing the back of his neck. A hawk circled high above them, crying once before vanishing into the sun. Clara's eyes fell on her father's grave, the crooked wooden cross, the small patch of fresh-turned soil. She felt the weight of his promise, his hopes, and his failings all at once. When she spoke again, her voice was a whisper wrapped in dust. "Then I'll be your wife." Luke didn't move, didn't speak. Only a slow nod, like the wind had taken the breath from him. He turned toward his horse, his spurs clicking softly. "Pack what you need," he said without looking back. "We ride before dark." And then he was gone, his figure swallowed by the sunlight, a shadow against the burning sky. The sheriff folded his papers quietly and touched his hat. "Guess that settles it," he murmured. Clara stood there a long moment, the cradle still in her arms. The house creaked behind her, dry boards moaning like old bones. When she finally moved, it was toward her father's grave. She knelt, brushed the dust from his name carved in pine, and whispered, "You said to fight for what's ours. I hope this counts." The wind shifted, carrying her words across the plain like a prayer only the dead could hear. From somewhere far off, the sound of hooves faded into the coming dusk. And as the last light bled out over Bitter Creek, the old storyteller's voice drifted low and rough, like gravel sliding down a canyon wall. And that's how it began, the strangest marriage the West ever saw. A girl with nothing but a name, and a man haunted by his own. The land remembered their promise, and the dust never forgot. The House of Secrets. The storm hadn't passed when they reached Kerrigan's Hollow. Lightning ripped open the sky, throwing silver veins across the valley. The iron gate moaned as it swung, and the house loomed up from the rain. Dark wood, tall chimneys, shutters rattling like teeth. Clara's skirts clung to her legs as she climbed down from the horse. Wind slapped her face, sharp with the smell of wet earth and pine. She pulled her shawl tighter. Luke didn't offer a hand. He only said, "Inside." The doors opened to a hall lit by a single lantern. The light trembled on polished floors and portraits too old to name. Two servants appeared, a woman in gray and a stooped man with a candle, both staring as though a ghost had walked in. Luke removed his hat, water running from its brim. "This is Mrs. Kerrigan," he said flatly. "You'll show her respect." The words fell heavy, strange, final. Clara saw the servant woman's eyes flicker, not surprise, but pity. A log snapped in the fireplace. Shadows stretched long across the walls. Luke turned and walked toward the back of the house, boots echoing. "You'll have the east room," the woman murmured, voice soft as dust. "It's warmer." Clara followed her upstairs. Every step groaned underfoot. The hallway smelled faintly of lilac and smoke. A single door stood locked to the far end, iron keyhole dark and deep. A child's toy horse lay beside it, small, wooden, one wheel missing. She paused. "Whose room is that?" The servant hesitated. "Don't ask, ma'am. Mr. Kerrigan don't like it opened." Then she left, candle flames shaking as she went. Clara closed her own door. The room was neat but cold, the bed too large, the window too wide. She could hear the rain clawing at the glass. Somewhere below, boots paced slow and steady across the floor. Morning came pale and quiet. Mist hung over the range like smoke from a dying fire. Clara stepped outside, sleeves rolled, feeding the horses herself. The stable hands watched from a distance, whispering. "She's the debt girl," one said. "Married him to save her house," said another. "Won't last a week." She pretended not to hear. When she turned, Luke was standing by the corral fence, arms folded. His shirt sleeves were rolled, revealing a jagged scar running up his forearm like lightning. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I can work. I didn't marry you for that." "Then why did you?" she asked. He didn't answer, only looked past her toward the hills, where the sun was breaking through the mist. Days folded into one another like cards. Luke was up before dawn, gone before breakfast, riding the fence lines, counting cattle. He spoke little, ate less. At night, Clara read by lantern light, the silence thick as syrup. Sometimes she'd hear a soft sound from upstairs, the creak of a door that should have been locked, or the faint hum of a woman's lullaby. She asked the servant about it once. The woman only crossed herself and said, "Best not to listen, ma'am. The hollow keeps its memories." One night, thunder rolled again. Luke came in wet from rain, mud on his boots. He stopped when he saw her sitting by the fire, mending his torn sleeve. "You don't have to do that," he said quietly. She looked up. "Someone should." He hesitated, then sat. For a moment, the firelight caught the hollow of his face, tired eyes, unshaven jaw, the weight of something old pressing down on him. He reached for the torn sleeve, ran his fingers along the stitching. "Your father saved me once." She looked up. "You said that before." "What did you mean?" He stared into the fire. "We were both young. I was running from the law, a fool with a gun and a name that didn't belong in daylight. He hid me, fed me, told me to start clean. What did you call yourself then?" His jaw tightened. "Doesn't matter now." She wanted to ask more, but his eyes had gone far away, seeing ghosts she couldn't touch. The clock ticked between them. The rain fell harder. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "You think marrying me repays that debt?" He met her gaze. "It's a start." Then he stood and left, the door closing slow behind him. Another night. The wind howled down the chimneys like something lost. Clara woke to the sound of footsteps in the hall, soft, dragging, careful. She sat up, heart pounding. The lamp on her bedside flickered once, twice. Then she heard it, the lullaby again, faint as breath. "Hush now, little one. Don't you cry. The stars are waiting in the sky." She rose, bare feet cold on the floorboards, and opened the door. The hallway was empty. Only the locked room waited at the far end, moonlight silvering the handle. The toy horse was gone. She stepped closer, every creak loud as thunder. She reached out, fingertips brushing the cold brass knob. "Don't!" Luke's voice cut through the dark. He was standing behind her, half in shadow, shirt open at the throat, eyes hard. "I thought I heard." "You didn't." His tone was sharp, but his hands trembled slightly. "That room stays shut. Always." "Why?" He didn't answer, only turned away. "Go back to bed." But before he left, she saw something in his eyes, grief, raw and naked, like a wound that never closed. The next morning, the sky was clear, the air heavy with silence. Luke rode out early, leaving dust in his wake. Clara watched from the porch, sunlight painting gold over the hills. Then she turned back to the empty house, its windows watching her like eyes. She began to clean floors, shelves, old picture frames. In the study, she found a single photograph tucked inside a drawer. Luke standing beside a woman and a child, their smiles faint but real. The back read, in faded ink, "Mary and Sam," before the fire. Her hands went cold. She put the picture back and closed the drawer. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying the dry rattle of leaves across the porch. By the time Luke returned that night, the photograph was gone, the drawer locked tight once more. After supper, Clara stood at the doorway, watching the sky turn to embers. Luke joined her silently. For a while, neither spoke. The land stretched wide and red before them, the last light spilling over the fence lines. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, lonely as sin. Luke said finally, "You could leave if you wanted." She turned to him. "And go where?" "The world doesn't give homes to beggars or widows." He studied her for a long time. "You're not a beggar." "Then what am I?" His jaw worked once, twice. Then, almost too softly, "Someone I owe more than I can ever pay." The wind sighed through the grass, carrying the scent of rain again. Clara looked toward the ridge where the storm clouds were gathering, and there, for the briefest heartbeat, a dark figure stood watching the house. A man, motionless. Lightning flared, and he was gone. The storyteller's voice rose from the wind itself, low and rough as dust through gravel. And so the hollow waited. A house full of ghosts, a man full of guilt, and a woman who'd traded her name for a promise. But on the far ridge, death was already saddling his horse. Ghosts in the wind. The saloon doors crashed open like thunder. Every head turned. Luke Kerrigan stepped in out of the dusk, hat low, coat heavy with trail dust. The piano stopped mid-note. Only the wind dared to move, slipping through the cracks and stirring the curtains like ghosts. At the far end of the room, a man rose from a corner table. His beard was streaked with gray, his eyes sharp and smiling, the kind of smile that hides a blade. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, voice slow as syrup. "If it ain't Black Jack Kerrigan." Luke didn't flinch. The name landed like a shot in the quiet. "Not anymore," he said. Jed Sloan's grin widened. "Oh, I reckon it's still you." Hard to forget a man who left his own brothers in the dust, took the gold, took the horses, and left the rest to hang. Chairs scraped. Men backed away. Luke's hand hovered near his gun. "You're wrong, Sloan. Wrong." Sloan spat. "You left me bleeding in Sonora Canyon with 3 bullets and no horse. You think I'd forget that? I paid for what I did," Luke said evenly. "Paid every day since." Sloan leaned on the table, eyes glinting. "Not yet you haven't." He dropped a folded paper on the table, a land claim. "Kerrigan's Hollow. Deed says it used to belong to the bank. Now it's mine. Bought it fair, through a friend in Redstone." Luke's jaw tightened. "You're lying." Sloan shrugged. "Maybe, but I'm coming for it, truth or not. You got a week to ride out, or I'll burn you out." He pushed past Luke, brushing his shoulder, and laughed as he went. "See you soon, Blackjack." The laughter followed him out into the street. Luke stood still a long time, eyes fixed on the door. Then he turned, dropped a coin on the counter, and walked out into the dying light. Clara saw the look on his face when he rode up that night. Dust clung to him like shadows. His horse trembled, foam thick on its reins. She was waiting on the porch, lantern in hand. What happened? Luke dismounted slowly. A ghost rode back into town. He brushed past her, heading for the barn. She followed. Inside, he stripped off his gloves and slammed a rifle down on the table. Jed Sloan. Clara froze. "Who's that?" "Man I used to ride with," Luke said. "Before your father found me half dead on a border trail." She could hear the tremor in his voice. Anger, guilt, something heavier. "What does he want?" "Everything." He looked up at her, eyes cold as the storm outside. "He's coming for the ranch. For me." The barn filled with silence, broken only by the restless horses shifting in their stalls. Clara took a slow breath. "Then we fight." Luke stared at her. "You don't know what you're saying. I know what it means to lose everything." For the first time, something flickered behind his expression, a spark of respect, or maybe fear. By sundown the next day, the hollow was on edge. Luke rode the fence lines, checking rifles, counting rounds. Clara worked beside him without complaint, rolling ammunition, setting lanterns, drawing water from the well. When she wasn't watching the horizon, she was watching him. He looked older now, harder. But sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking, she saw him touch the wall of that locked room upstairs, just a brush of his hand like a prayer. That night, the wind turned cruel. Luke sat alone at the table, cleaning his revolver by lantern light. Clara stepped in quietly, the firelight catching her face. He didn't look up. "You should sleep." "I can't." Neither spoke for a while. Then, softly, she asked, "Was that your wife's room?" He froze. The silence between them thickened until the clock ticked like a hammer. "Finally," he said, "her name was Mary. Our boy was Sam. Bandits hit the ranch when I was gone. Sloan's men. I came back to ashes." Clara's throat tightened. "I buried them here," he said. "Behind that door." Couldn't stand to move him. She set a hand on his shoulder. "That's not weakness, Luke." He looked up at her, eyes red in the lamplight. "No, feels like it." She shook her head. "You've been running from the wrong ghost." His hand closed over hers, rough, trembling. "And you? Why do you stay?" "Because you didn't take my home," she said simply. "You gave it back." A sound outside cut her words short, the distant echo of hooves. Luke rose instantly, rifle in hand. "They're here." Dust rolled down the ridge like smoke. 10 riders, maybe 12, their silhouettes black against the moonlight. Clara and Luke took positions, him by the porch rail, her by the barn window. Lanterns flickered in the wind. The air smelled of rain and gunpowder. Sloan's voice rose across the dark. "Kerrigan, you got one chance to ride out. Leave the woman, leave the land." Luke's reply was steady. This land's already been paid for. A shot rang out. The fight began. Gunfire cracked across the valley, sparks leaping from stone and wood. Horses screamed. Clara ducked behind a post, reloading, her hands slick with sweat. Luke moved like he'd done it 1,000 times, calm, precise, deadly. His rifle sang in the dark, one shot, one fall, another. But there were too many. Clara ran to the porch, dragging a spare rifle from the wall. A bullet tore through the railing inches from her hand. She dropped flat, heart hammering. "Clara!" Luke shouted. "Stay down." She ignored him, firing through the window. Saw one rider fall, saw another turn tail. Then, in the flash of lightning, she saw the impossible, the locked door upstairs swinging open. For an instant, she glimpsed a small wooden cradle inside, a toy horse beside it, and a flame licking up the curtains. "Luke!" she screamed. He turned, just as a bullet struck the wall behind him, close enough to draw blood from his cheek. Clara sprinted into the house. Smoke filled the hall, fire curling from the open door. She grabbed a blanket, beat the flames back with her bare hands. The cradle toppled, the toy horse rolling to her feet. She caught it, burned and blackened, and held it to her chest. Luke burst in behind her, coughing through the smoke. When he saw the open room, he froze, face white. He fell to his knees beside the scorched cradle, voice breaking. "Mary! Sam!" Clara knelt beside him, gripping his arm. "You can't stay here." He looked at her through the smoke, eyes wet. "I failed them." "Then don't fail me now," she said. Outside, another gunshot cracked the air. Luke rose, grabbed his rifle. His voice was steady again. "Let's finish this." They fought until dawn. By the time the last shot echoed, the yard was littered with empty shells and silence. Sloane's men were gone, some dead, most scattered to the wind. Sloane himself had fled into the canyons, bleeding and cursing. Luke stood on the porch, smoke rising from his gun barrel, the first light breaking behind him. Clara stood beside him, soot streaked across her face, the toy horse still in her hand. The wind carried the smell of burnt wood and rain. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, the hardness in his face cracked. "You should have run," he said. She shook her head. "Not from you." He exhaled, shoulders dropping, eyes softening. "Then maybe this place still has a chance." The storyteller's voice rose, low and solemn, over the wind. And so the hollow stood, scarred but breathing. The fire had taken its due, but left behind two souls too stubborn to die. Yet far off, in the red canyons, Jed Sloane wasn't done. The wind still carried his promise that he'd be back for blood. Ashes and vows. Rain hit the roof like hammer blows. Luke Kerrigan slammed the door against the wind, shoulders heaving, coat soaked through. The storm had rolled in fast, too fast, hiding everything beyond the porch in sheets of black rain. "Clara!" he shouted over the roar. "Get the horses inside. They'll spook." She ran from the barn, hair plastered to her face, eyes fierce and bright even in the downpour. They're already tied, the gates holding. Lightning split the sky, and for a heartbeat, Luke saw it, a figure on the ridge, a rider. Then darkness swallowed it again. He grabbed his rifle, chamber round. He's back. Clara's breath caught. Sloane, or what's left of him. The wind howled down the valley, rattling the shutters and bending the trees until they groaned. Luke moved through the house, every board creaking under his boots. The fire burned low, throwing long shadows that danced across the walls. On the table lay a single envelope, wet, torn, marked with a black handprint. He picked it up, turned it over. Inside was a scrap of paper, scrawled in rough charcoal. One more debt to pay. A shot cracked through the window. Glass exploded. "Down!" Luke grabbed Clara and dragged her behind the hearth as another bullet splintered the mantel. Through the smoke and dust, he saw the shape of a man outside, cloak whipping in the storm, lantern light flickering over a scarred face. Jed Sloane. Luke moved first. He kicked open the back door, rolled into the mud, and fired. The flash lit the rain, carving the night into silver and shadow. Sloane ducked behind the wagon, returned fire, the shots echoing like thunderclaps. still hiding behind a woman. Kerrigan? Sloane's voice carried through the rain. Luke's jaw clenched. You came for blood. You'll get it. He darted behind a trough, reloaded, and waited, counting the rhythm of the storm. When the next thunder rolled, he moved, firing twice. One bullet grazed Sloane's shoulder. The other struck his lantern, spilling flame into the mud. Sloane cursed, clutching his arm. You think you can wash your sins clean? You think she don't know what you did? Luke didn't answer. Tell her, Sloane roared. Tell her who burned her daddy's farm for bounty money. The words hit like a blow. Clara froze in the doorway, rain soaking her dress, eyes wide with disbelief. Luke, what is he saying? Luke's breath came hard, gun still raised. Clara, it ain't. Tell her the truth. Sloane shouted. For a moment, even the storm seemed to pause. Luke lowered his rifle, rain dripping from his hat brim. His voice was rough, raw. It was me. Years back. I didn't know your name, didn't know whose land it was. Sloane's gang took the job. I just rode with him. They said the owner was a cheat, a thief. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. I found out too late, he said. When I saw the farmhouse burning, when I saw your father pulled from it. Stop, she cried. The pain in her voice tore through him harder than any bullet could. Sloane laughed, low and cruel. There it is. The truth burns better than fire. Luke turned toward him, eyes like flint. You used me then, Sloane, but not tonight. He lifted his gun. The two men fired almost in the same heartbeat. Sloane's bullet struck Luke high in the chest, spinning him back against the wall. Luke's shot found Sloane's gut, the impact folding him to his knees. For a moment, both were silent, the rain hissing between them, blood mixing with mud. Clara ran to Luke, hands pressed against his wound. No, stay with me. He caught her wrist, eyes steady despite the pain. Listen to me. He's finished. But you still got something worth keeping. Sloane coughed, a dark laugh breaking from his throat. She'll never forgive you. Luke dragged himself forward, each breath shallow, voice barely a whisper. I ain't asking her to. He raised his pistol one last time. The hammer clicked. Sloane's grin vanished. You ain't got the guts. Luke's hand didn't shake. No, just justice. The shot was final. Sloane fell back into the mud and didn't move again. The rain softened. The world went still. Clara knelt beside Luke, tears mixing with the storm on his face. Don't you dare leave me now, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Guess I already did once. Stop it. You're not dying. But he was. They both knew it. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, soot-blackened toy horse, the same one she'd saved from the fire. You kept this, he said. You saved more than you know. She pressed her forehead to his. Please, Luke. He caught her hand, pressed it to his chest. Promise me, keep the hollow. Don't let it die with me. She nodded, sobbing. His eyes softened, drifting toward the window where the clouds were breaking, the first light spilling across the valley. Looks like the rain's quit tin, he murmured. Good day for starting over. His breath faded like the last echo of thunder. Days later, the storm was only a memory. Clara stood on the porch, wind brushing her hair, the fields glistening with new green. Behind her, the house stood rebuilt, scarred but standing. She carried the toy horse in one hand, the land deed in the other. A rider approached from the ridge, the sheriff, hat in hand. Heard you ran off Sloane's gang for good. Clara nodded, voice quiet. They won't be back. He looked past her, toward the graves beneath the oak tree. You bury him next to him? Where he belongs, she said. The sheriff tipped his hat. Hollow's yours now, Miss Kerrigan. Or Mrs. Kerrigan, I should say. She smiled faintly, eyes distant. No, just Claire'll do. He rode off, leaving her in the quiet hum of morning. She turned toward the valley, the same land her father had once bled for, the same place Luke had died to protect. The wind stirred the grass like waves. For a long while, she stood there listening. Somewhere in that whispering wind, she could almost hear him, his voice low, steady, calling her name. Clara smiled through her tears. I kept my promise, Luke. The hollow still breathes. The camera would pull back, wide, sweeping, showing the house, the fields, the graves beneath the old oak. The storm clouds faded to gold, the land washed clean. And as the horizon burned with morning light, the narrator's voice carried the final words. Love don't always come gentle. Sometimes it rides through fire and blood to find its home again. And when it does, the West remembers.